Hi, everyone. So excited to be here, especially with my good friend and colleague, Karl Dakin. If you don't know Karl, you have
So, if you don't know me yet, this is my chance to introduce myself while Don's image in this broadcast is frozen. And Don will probably have to exit and come back in. But I'm Karl Dakin. I hold myself out as the capital coach. I work with small businesses and community projects primarily, assisting them as a coach in designing, staging, and conducting capital campaigns. And we are going to be talking about negotiation this morning as soon as Don re enters the studio. And I'm happy to jump into the conversation with Don and see where the conversation takes us this morning as we get this thing going. But I don't know whether it's because it's snowing heavily here in Denver right now that we have weather issues, or this is an internet matter, or something else. But I'm old enough to remember back a few decades where moving small amounts of information across the internet was a brand new experiment. It's not the daily deluge that we all experience today. So I'm sure that Don will figure out what it is or is not working with either our SaaS provider or his internet link or something else. But in the meantime, I'm here and I cannot see any of the comments in the chat room. So I'm kind of flying blind here until Don gets back on board. But the topic of today was negotiation. And negotiation is a form of communication. It typically is intended to lend itself to accomplishing, bringing two parties together to do something that they could not do separately. And Don is back. And so now that I've defined negotiation and identified myself and solicited all of your followers to send me $100 each by the end of the program, then then we're good to go.
Well, I intentionally had a technological issue so you could get full space on your initial comments. Didn't want to distract you. So I'm back, and I'm back hopefully with full power enough to get us through the hour. And I guess that lends itself to really understanding negotiation. And it's not just between people, it's between situations also, right? So you negotiate your way through a technological default. I guess negotiating is working through, working with, coming up with some common quality or good through that cooperative effort. And negotiation is really a matter in most cases of give and take. And it may not be the same give or the same take involved. So a lot of it is what's the value you can bring to somebody else, so that if nothing else, you can make them appreciate what the opportunity is, or you can allow yourself to discuss why you're taking a position. So a lot of negotiation has to do with foundation. Someone says, I think that's too high. And the next question would be, why is that? What are you seeing, and what can you share with me? Because most people want to come to agreement, I would say, on average, for anything they do. They like to go in, purchase something, get it, and go home. They see the object, they see the price, they make that decision. If you want to get more for something than people appreciate, you need to give them some justification or foundation. Well, the material is so much nicer, or the craftsmanship, or the longevity, because it's really taking somebody from where they are to where you hope they can go with you. And most of that is based on trust too. I think that's a great fundamental. When someone says, I need something, and you know them to be a straight shooter, and they usually are looking out for everybody's behalf. So negotiation isn't always about getting an advantage or squeaking something through to an unknowing person, but to really make all the value adds apparent and be there to justify it, and also be there to see someone else's point of view. And sometimes a negotiation is just an agreement that nothing will change, but we also understand why we're doing this. And there's also the possibility of renegotiation down the road if one chooses. So that could be conditional negotiation where it says, if this doesn't happen, I'm willing to make up for it, or, you're trusting me. If it doesn't work out, I'm willing to stand behind it. So, I think this is critical, especially to what Carl does, because he's an educator as well as somebody who's supporting funding and bringing people together. So, how does that uh, look from your standpoint as far as the fundamentals of good negotiation?
Well, to me, I think there's a distinction made between something that is immediate, um, that you can do without negotiation. So if I'm going to the store and buying a loaf of bread, I pretty much can make a decision on my own without anyone else being involved to share with me information. It's partly because there's all the information on the back of the packaging, which should tell me all the vitamin nutrients and what the ingredients are, whether it contains anything that I might be allergic to, all those kinds of things, and the prices on it. Whether it's the sticker price or it's a discount or a sales price or I have a digital coupon, I can make a decision without anyone else being involved. And so, in some ways, communication has occurred. It's already been embedded with the product, and we're not going there. I see negotiation as more where I need more information in order to make a decision. And the other person may or may not need more information, but we're going to want to engage in communication. We are going to work towards building a relationship that will result in formation of a relationship of some kind. And so the question then becomes, what do they need to know? What do I need to know to move this forward to come to a point where I decide it's good for me, they decide it's good for them? Sometimes it's obvious. If I need a loaf of bread because I'm hungry, there's not much to negotiate. If I went down to the market and culturally I was going to haggle over something, I might haggle over the price because it's day old bread or it's not a kind of bread I was looking for, or some other reason where it's not fully satisfying my needs. But I can't haggle over the fact it's bread.
Mhm.
It's food. Um, and so quite often in negotiations, we have people who are trying to drive a relationship, force a relationship, trying to make something happen because they're paid salespeople who are being paid a commission who may not care any at all about me or anything else. They're counting their commission check right now, and they will say or do anything in order to make this deal come down. That's a short-term proposition because if I found out they lied or cheated or misled me, there will be no second opportunity for us to have a relationship. That one person will get a black mark that will go in my little book of people I'll never do business with, and I'll move on. But if I want to do a long-term relationship, and this is where in investment we have potential for what we call infinite relationships until death do us part type of relationships. If I buy stock in a small company and I never intend to sell that stock and the company stays in business, then we have the potential for the stock to outlive either the person I'm talking to, the small business leader, or myself. And so as we enter into that conversation, I want information not just about today, but the future, who they are, so much more information. And there is a possibility that this benefit to me may never be realized. That's a risk inherent to making an investment. And so I'm going to ask more questions rather than less questions. And I will never get a perfect answer because no one has a crystal ball that can give us a forecast of future accurately. Um, so we may want to go back after we strike a deal, as you described it, and restrike the deal. That is, amend our relationship to make it fit better for both of us, so that we can continue the relationship and realize a benefit from it. So to me, negotiation is a critical part of forming the relationship. Communication is necessary to make people aware, uh, allow them to become educated on the thing, and make a informed decision if they want to enter into the relationship. And these are all elements of making a pitch and promoting an investment that anyone who's raising funding should pay, good detail to, should develop a skill set in, and be prepared to meet the requirements.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And what really strikes me is the conditions around negotiation. So some are time, right? If you're running out of time, you're going to pay a premium for someone to push their schedule ahead to get you funded, let's say. It also relates to, are you dealing with a transaction or a continuing relationship? Usually when you buy a car, it's a transaction. You may end up going back there and buying another car, but most likely you don't really have that on your mind when you bought that car. You may not ever see that salesman again, so that would change. And the benefit or the truthfulness of the result of the negotiation will be more apparent in time. So if you bought a car that worked really well, worked better than expectation, you're probably going to be more of a loyal customer than if your expectation was something and not really fulfilled. And so, what's good for some may not have any reason or meaning for somebody else, which is an easy give, right? If someone says, can you shake my hand after we're done? I think that's an easy thing to do. I know it's a simple thing, but, it's really understanding what is driving somebody on the other side. Once you understand what the driver is, then you know what your negotiation or not should be. Sometimes you just say, not a problem, happy to go along. It really doesn't cost me anything. Or if it means that much more to you, and we're really focused on generating goodwill and best practices, a little give and take is helpful, right? Anytime you negotiate and have an absolute, like this is it, take it or leave it, you're going to get a faster answer. But once you say that, you can't go back to it and still have any semblance of credibility. Do this or I'm leaving. And they say, well, leave. Well, I thought about it for 5 seconds. I decided there's something else I can do. And then, you've kind of exposed yourself as being not somebody who negotiates in good faith. And, that's really important because it's the takeaway, right? If someone got what they wanted but still felt like they got taken advantage of, it didn't bring any value to either party, and you're better off not doing it if it's not going to be fulfilling enough for those people. But we've got Kerry with us. Kerry comes in with his first joke. Why did the nacho become a comedian? Because it knew how to crack people up. Okay. And Kerry has a personal question about finance. Hello, Karl. I have a question. Why is it so hard to get help paying property tax? Here in Texas, they raised the homestead to 100,000 to help with taxes, they said. It only helped the older people, which I'm glad they got help. But that puts me in possibility of being homeless in January when the bill is issued. Why is it so hard, I guess, is the question of paying property to get help. I guess, what do you think, Karl?
Yeah, so it was actually one of my discussions earlier today before the program. I was talking with a partner on a project where obviously the election was the starting point. And my response was that in the project we're involved with, possibly the government, regardless of who's in charge, is our biggest adversary. And part of that is that the government supposedly is doing stuff for the greater good. And one of the things they do to pay for the services of the government is they collect taxes. Now, those taxes may be on income, they may be on property, they may be on transactions, such as a sales tax, but these pay for the government to do everything that the government does. And there's, in effect, negotiation taking place here, Don. We're going to bring this back to center for today's program. But yesterday, over the last few weeks, you had a chance to vote, and by voting, you are declaring your support for someone who had promised you that they would represent you well within the government and make the government do its job to create a win-win scenario. So, if I'm paying taxes and the street outside my house is good, I feel safe at night because there's firefighters and policemen out there to help me. If I think the schools are doing a good job in educating my kids, I've entered into a deal with the government by paying taxes, and I'm getting a benefit back from that. And one of the problems with property tax is that it's tied to the land without regard to whether the land is generating income. So, particularly elder people who are on fixed income, when property values go up, so go the property taxes. This is a major issue here in Colorado. It's not been dealt with properly by our government, which seems to like the additional taxes they're collected and think that somehow that this is okay by them to put people who have this much income in a position where they have higher and higher and higher taxes. And what it does is it forces older people to move into their kids' home, and other things will happen along the way. And there's not necessarily a corresponding benefit coming from the government. So the only way to fix that is to vote new people into office who will honor their commitment to represent you in government, and be efficient with the use of that money so that you're getting good value for the taxes that you pay. But property tax, if you look at it as different from sales tax or income tax, one of the challenges as they try to balance these three types of taxes is that it's not tied to income. So it can go up with no associated income and you get caught out. If it's sales tax, it's tied to how much you spend. It's income, it's how much money you make. So there's some correlation there. But property taxes, by and large, are there because they give the government more stable income over time because incomes go up and down and sales go up and down. So they love property taxes.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And what comes to mind after what you just mentioned was that there's usually a lack of correction when it doesn't serve the right purpose, right? So, if someone is gaining value in an asset, but it's not liquid, but they have to pay liquid money to continue to have that asset, right? So your house went up 200,000, but your income hasn't kept up, and all of a sudden you see your tax bill or your insurance bill or anything. I mean, if you go to Florida, that's happening there. People are getting priced out of insurance, which is starting to have an impact on real estate. And so what do you have? You're land rich and cash poor. And you can borrow on your house if you can afford to pay the payments, right? You can have a $500,000 worth of equity and want to borrow just 50 grand to catch up or clean up, and it's not going to happen. So it either forces you to sell your house and get the money and get out of paying taxes you can't afford, but it puts people in a bad situation because where they achieve something, they kept making their payments, they kept keeping up their house and maybe even improving their house and actually then enhancing the property value, which then enhances the property tax. So a lot of it is timing and position, right? If someone says, hey, we can accrue your tax and attach it to the property when you sell it and pay us when you get it, I think that, but these are two, I think when you have big issues, there aren't very simple solutions all the time, because it affects somebody differently when you do that, which could be who knows what type of party you have. Thank you, Carl. I did vote. We have new people in office coming in soon. Um,
A few new people.
yeah, and again, what is their motivation? And their motivation is to stay in office, right? How
That's
do they stay in office?
absolutely correct. They have one motivation, that's get elected, and after they get elected, it's to stay in office. Unfortunately, the primary agenda of most elected officials is power. It's not necessarily serving or protecting the people. I would have to say that, although I'm an unaffiliated voter currently, my sense of libertarianism is increasing with my increasing frustration with the government and its tendency to do things that serve the people in power and not serve the people. I know lots of people are very frustrated here and there, and I think that we just need to do the best we can to hold our elected officials accountable whenever we can. And it's going to be hard. But as an example, Don, I do a program that you're aware of where I teach a course at the University of Denver, and that involves doing transactions in the country of Belize. In Belize, their property tax structure is radically different. The only time you pay modest, very, very modest property taxes year after year, but you pay your primary tax when the property is sold, which ties it to a transaction, which matches it with cash flow, which makes a lot of sense from a person who deals with doing transactions all the time. And so it's hard for somebody to become impoverished or pushed out of their house or something else if they're doing is staying in their house. If they sell it, then they're going to give up a share of that to the government in taxes. But a completely different system than here in the United States. And there's other countries that follow similar things. And I think that it would be an improvement in our tax system from a standpoint of fairness, but it leaves the government in a position where if we have a recession and nobody sells their house for 3 years, they collect no money. So this is considered to be something that evens out tax income to the government. So we have continuing services, but it's got flaws in it. Everything we're dealing with has flaws, and we have to do the best we can to fix it. But our current legislature here in Colorado has failed to do that.
Yeah, well, I think that brings up another point, which is we're living in a dynamic, fast-paced world that's still being judged and measured by old, antiquated laws, ways of doing things. And there needs to be a better alignment or responsiveness that, in the markets, they change by the second, right? Someone comes out with earnings and boom, everything changes up or down or around. But go ahead, Carl.
You don't even have to release earnings. 6 weeks before, some guy stands up on a podium and says he's a prognosticator about future value of that stock. He makes a stock forecast, and the stock value changes before anything actually happens. One of my frustrations is listening to the news where they go, "Well, it came in below expectations," or "It came in above expectations," and I'm like, okay, well, who cares about the expectations? Who's the person who's wrong all the time? It's like the weather forecaster, although they were accurate today, it is snowing and it will snow all day. So,
yeah, well, that really makes people need to be more sophisticated and more balanced in their decision making as opposed to the next best shining object out there. And it's really hard if you're at the bottom or trying to work yourself up to the middle, right? Because your voice supposedly is equal, but it's not heard equally, and, whether that's fair. And I know a lot of people say it's not fair, and fair is a conditional term relative to what, and, in essence, it is what it is. You got to work with what you got and until things change. But it is being more proactive, and it is becoming part of a group that can support each other towards something. So, negotiation is a constantly changing element. Again, it can go from sales, which is usually what people think. I went to buy a car, they gave me 30% off, and they made the deal for me. And that's pretty simple. And it's more direct, right? It's just you and the other party. It has nothing to do with government or past. It has to do with the moment, your needs, and the other person's needs, and how do you come together. What everybody would hope for is a win-win situation, which doesn't always come out that way. Maybe a big win and a small win. But again, is the transaction important, or is it what you achieved through the transaction that now you can invest or integrate? Like if someone sells you a tool that costs you $20, but it allows you to go to work and make your living, well, that tool is worth more than $20 to you. It's only worth $20 to the person who sold it to you, who paid $12. They achieved their 40% profit margin. And sometimes you pay a premium to get something that's going to have more collateral value than just direct value. And you're happy to do it, And if you really have to grind every penny out of something, there's not a lot to begin with, right? If you can't give it to me for a dollar cheaper, I'm walking away. Well, it only meant a dollar difference to you to have it or not have it. That whole story about what would you pay for water if you're sitting in a desert for 3 days? Well, whatever it cost, right? That's a whole different point than, hey, I'm just so totally hydrated, I could care less about a free softie or whatever it is. Again, there's some psychology to negotiation. But I wouldn't get too deep into that, because most people don't have the time to get to know somebody well enough to say, what's your motivation here? What's your intent? I want to know all that stuff. Most people are like, hey, just give it to me. Let me out of here. And my time I'm negotiating with at this point. So in other words, if it's a $10 item, I'm not going to spend 30 minutes without even knowledge that 30 minutes is going to get me anything. And even if you grind it out and you get it, it was torturous. And then naturally you would feel bad somewhat. We've got Beverly here. Beverly is just an outstanding LinkedIn and professional colleague of ours. I'm glad to be here. Always glad to see you, Beverly. We had a fantastic show yesterday, got an unbelievable amount of comments. Met a lady named Mara from Milan, Italy, who I hadn't seen in a while. Beverly comes back with, exactly, Carl, who's the expert? So many talking heads. And expert is a term that's used pretty freely, and you're usually self-proclaiming. You decide I'm the expert. And, even on LinkedIn, they say, don't use expert or guru or anything else. You could say top LinkedIn speaker or top of this, and maybe at least you're saying I'm in this class. But again, how you project is how people see and feel you. And that has something to do with expectation and negotiation. So if you put yourself at too high a level, you're really not helping yourself. Or if you get too presumptuous too early in a negotiation, I know what you want, I know what you need, I got exactly, don't even talk, let's just get it done based on what I have to say. Usually it is a little bit challenging in that way. But, if you're a good negotiator, it can be fun. It can be enjoyable, especially if you are an advocate for all the parties, because if you set the right price and you're getting what you want, there's no reason to try and get more. If anything, it's like, what else can I do to make you happy today? When I had my business, they say customer service is your best sales tool, because that gives you an opportunity to live up to what the expectation was. If you bought this, don't worry about, we'll take it back. Well, when you take it back and someone asks you too many questions, that whole trust factor just disappeared. And the question is why? But what I always said to my customer service people, if you're going to do it fast and do it with a smile, right? There's no reason to bring in anything else. Well, you don't deserve it, but we're a good company. We're going to help you out this time. That doesn't go over too well. It's like, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. We believe in taking care of our customers to the highest level of service we can. And, a lot of times you would find if you asked a customer what they want, they would probably sometimes come back with less than you were willing to give. So let them be the judge. Well, sorry for that inconvenience. What can I do to make it right today? And usually at dinner, they would say, well, sorry about that. Can I get you a dessert or buy you a drink or something? Other times, I remember I was in a restaurant in Vail a long time ago, and I'd order lunch, and the place was packed. And there was an outside thing, and had to wait forever. And I remember ordering some Wiener Schnitzel, and it was tough, and I'm not usually one to send things back, but I said, I can hardly chew this. And I had like 2 bites, and the owner came back and said, you already ate a third of it. I said, well, I had to eat a third of it to know how bad it tasted. I wouldn't have known if I didn't eat it. And I took a second bite just to test the first bite. But anyways, it was so disheartening for me to have to complain about something that was legitimate and someone telling me I needed to pay for something I didn't like, wouldn't finish. And it really put a damper on that afternoon because it's like I'm not used to this, especially at a fine dining or an expensive place where people are really concerned with your interests. But again, it's one person, one situation. But the interesting thing is that Wiener Schnitzel has come and gone, but the story hasn't.
Yes.
So I continue to share it. They say an unhappy customer will share something 5 times more than a happy customer. And that's why I even said to my service people, even an unhappy person buys things and they'll continue to buy things, knowing who it is. If someone returns something every week after using it, they're into renting. And at that point, you just cut them off. And I see Costco is doing the same thing. If you don't have a membership card, you're not getting in because their primary source of income is their membership dues. If you can walk in, go through self-checkout, and somehow purchase something, you're defeating their foundation for doing business. So I think the best thing people can do is get more knowledgeable about what they're into. And if they don't have the knowledge or the time, find an expert. We say not to call yourself an expert, but ask a top person in the field to give you some advice. And again, depending on the cost, it may not make sense, right? You're not going to get a $500 an hour lawyer to get involved with something that's a $50 product unless you're just dealing with principle at that point. And there are people who have principles and feel taken advantage of, and they don't feel they should just walk away, even if it's going to cost them more to settle that issue. So, Karl, I talked quite a bit just now, but it does make for interesting conversation. And what have you done, if anything, to sharpen your ability to negotiate in the best faith possible?
The key thing is something that you mentioned earlier on. A good negotiation will result in a major benefit to both parties to the deal. And too often we approach a deal where we know what we need to make us happy, what benefit we want to take away from this, but we rarely truly understand what the other side needs. And in a simple deal, it may not require a lot of information. Whereas this, buying a coat, is it the right size? Kind of a question. Does it look good on me? Which might be challenging under any circumstance, but nonetheless, these are the kind of questions you ask. But if you get into more detailed things that involve relationships over time, then it's appropriate to ask more questions. But you really need to not only answer your questions, but you need to understand how the other side wins. Is this a win-win deal, or are they taking a beating on this particular transaction? Or did they cut corners, in order to make the deal happen? Did they take too small of a margin, which means they may not be there tomorrow to provide that customer support after the transaction is over because they couldn't afford to pay their staff to be available. So you have to look at this and understand, what the other side is. You have to ask questions, and one of the things that is almost never done, which I've learned, is I like to ask the question like, well, how can we make this deal better for you? And this catches almost everybody off guard because they're like, well, we're negotiating this deal and I've got my idea of what I think I need. And I'm going, yeah, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I think we can make this deal better. How can we upsize it, upgrade it? How can we add another feature or characteristic to it that makes it work better for you? It may cost me nothing to give you one more thing, one more feature, one more function. And if it makes you happier, then it makes the relationship better and it's better for both of us. And it's a surprising, but I challenge everybody watching the show today. The next time that you're in a negotiation, just say stop and says, I think this is what you're looking for, but what can we do to make this a better deal? And spend some time, because you'll get kind of behind the curtain. You'll get to understand who you're working with better. And you actually are laying the groundwork for a good long term relationship, even if you don't do the deal, because you were showing demonstration of respect for the other person and an appreciation for who they are and what they're doing. And that's all about relationship building, independent of concluding the negotiation. So I think that's a very important thing that I do now on a pretty regular basis. Is I ask a lot of questions, and people are going like, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "I want to make sure the deal works for both of us, but I'm also trying to figure out how to build a relationship that has duration, durability." Because it takes time and money for me to create a relationship, and if I have to create 1,000 a day, I don't have the time or money to do that. But if every day I have, more and more people on this side of the equation, then I'm building wealth through my relationships, and I want to be efficient in how I go about doing that.
Yeah, terrific points. And that's why I think I align and relate to Carl so well, is because a negotiation, again, if it's transactional, it's different than if it's relationship oriented. And it's a marketing expense that can bring great value if you allow it to. And part of it is sharing what you know they don't know, but what they should know or will know in time. So a lot of times people come in the store and they say, well, I want to buy this and it's a price and everybody agrees on it. But I know tomorrow it's going on sale for $10 off, right? Now, we all agreed, I know, but they don't know. They may never know, but it's in my best interest to say, by the way, we're going to put it on sale tomorrow. I'll give you the price today. Some people say it goes on sale tomorrow, come back tomorrow, right? And now you earned it, versus like, hey, I got some news. You picked the right item today, and I want to do that. The other thing I always did was I made a concession after the sale. So in other words, because I don't want to condition people to say every time I come in here, all I got to do is ask for a deal and I get it. That's really my part, that I come in voluntarily, which is always perceived as better. It's like, hey, I paid him the money and he gave me something extra at the end in return for for a reason. Thank you for being such a great customer. Thank you for spending a lot today. It means a lot. I want to give you something for that. And by the way, if you take 5 cards and you pass it out to your buddies and put your name on the back of it, I'll give you something next time you come in here. So you're actually using your customer as a sales vehicle and paying them no different than you would for a salesman. And I think that's what you want to do, is retain customers and optimize that relationship. Then just look at everybody as a pocketbook, and you're a supplier to extract money from it. And that's what really distinguishes the quality players from the mediocre players. The people go a step beyond. If you go to a wonderful hotel or a restaurant, they really focus on little things most people don't notice: how they fold a napkin, how they greet you, making sure whatever it is. And, a smarter waiter or waitress would say, is there anything specific I need to know to help make this meal more enjoyable? And somebody say, well, listen, I'm in a business meeting right now. Unless we ask for you, don't come by. Or, hey, we're thirsty today. Make sure that water keeps flowing. And Jim Rohn had an example of, he would always tip in advance to guarantee good service. So if he was going to give a $50 tip at the end and hope for the best, he would say, here's my tip. Here's exactly how I need you to serve me today. And most people say, great, because I know what I'm getting. A lot of times they'll look at somebody and say, he's a bum, he's not going to pay anything. That happens in Mercedes dealerships all the time. Someone comes in a little ragged and they make a judgment not knowing that person could probably buy the dealership if they chose to. And it's doing that little thing, putting yourself in the buyer's shoes, right? Asking yourself, how would you feel if someone just told you what you just told that person? And what makes you happy? And usually what makes you happy makes people like you happy. And just being able to offer the opportunity, let's discuss this, right? Someone brings something up, you can't just say no. You may know you're going to say no, but give a person a chance to explain. Okay, why, people, and sometimes people will come up, I know what that cost you. I know what your expenses are. I think this is a fair amount of money you should be making today. And I'm talking to builders or carpenters who are making very good money. And I would say, well, how would you feel if someone discounted what you do because they felt you would take that anyways? And it just is counterintuitive to be like that. And, you want to wake up as a negotiator, feeling good about what you're about to do today. Feeling like, hey, I'm going to get this person into a home they never thought they could buy. Or I'm going to allow this person to buy this car based on whatever I can do to help them. Beverly comes back with, agreed, Karl. It has to be a win-win. What's the why? How does this work for both of us? And that's a negotiation when everybody has a free voice to speak, right? And everybody has an opportunity to share their case. And based on it, it's not always the numbers, it's the emotion, right? If someone says, I really need this badly. I mean, I remember when we downsized from our big house and we put a lot of furniture on Craigslist and other places. I can tell you half of what we had, we gave away because I had people that had terrible stories of all kinds of despair. And I would say, just take it. The $75 isn't, I just say, just take it. It would do us both good. One last thing I'll say about negotiation. My wife used to always have these garage sales every year in our neighborhood. And it took so much work and it took so much time. And it was like the weekend, but she made it fun because all the neighbors would bring their stuff over and they'd sit with her and I'd help out on weekends. And I remember people would come in and drive up with a bunch of $1 bills, in their hand. And whatever it is, it'd be like, would you take $1 for it? It could have been 3, it could have been 20. And one lady said to me, would you take a quarter for it? And I said, no, I can't take a quarter, but I can give it to you for free, and I would feel better about that than taking a quarter for something that was a keepsake or a memory or something else. So sometimes you can break out of the mold. Sometimes you can do things that aren't always top dollar or the last dollar that you receive. But again, that's something that it has to be justified by something. Give me, I think the part of the negotiation, give me a reason. Even if you have to go to your sales manager, right? I got to go there and I got to tell them why I'm discounting this. If you can give me a legitimate reason, I might be able to help you. But if it's just, I don't want to pay a lot of money, well, that's not going to fly. Uh, but I think a good negotiator really transitions to a good salesperson. And a salesperson, again, is more of a service person than trying to like weasel. It's not the guy in the dealership in 1960 who was wearing the big pinky ring, and dressed up to the nines, trying to be a big shot. That has changed. Everything's more casual. And all of a sudden, everything has moved more online, which is less personal. Fill out the data, we'll tell you if you qualify. There is no real talking. You can put some information in. And I think that's really being prepared and understanding what's involved with a negotiation. And a first timer is going to be at a disadvantage against a veteran who's really good at it. So, in your experience with buyers, a lot of time, or actually sellers, their valuation is totally unrealistic at times because it's theirs and they forget when they sell it, they're not part of it anymore in most cases. And maybe they're the biggest part of the value of the business.
Well, in raising capital, the the true value is not its value today, but its value at the time that the investor sells or resells that investment to someone else. And so valuation is a constant point of conflict in the negotiations because the entrepreneur sees the potential, they have a vision for what it could be, what it might be, and they want a price that's appropriate for the value that they're going to bring. This is countered by the fact that it hasn't happened. They may not have the capability to get to the point that they would like to get to. It's a vision without substance. And so you will see battles taking place along the line between the investor and the entrepreneur over valuation. And there are some efforts that have been made to mitigate this by creating in between instruments like a convertible note or a safe note or some other instrument that will have value shift over time if there is some change in performance. These are difficult to work with. I don't like them for the fact that they are kicking the can down the road. They're giving people excuses not to do the hard work today to try to figure out where this is going to go. I think there's better mechanisms out there. But I get approached by people all the time who go, "Hey, here's my offering document. Here's the price point. Here's this. What do you think?" And my knee jerk reaction today is, "Well, I really can't help you because you've already decided what you're worth. You've already decided who you want to talk to invest in this. And if you're wrong on either one of those, I can't fix it. Okay, it's too late." Quite often, what they're looking for is a free referral onto an investor candidate within my network, which I don't do. Um, and but A big mistake that people make is anticipating what they think the other person wants without ever asking the question or doing any preparatory investigation into who that person is and what would benefit them. And without doing that, they are at risk by locking into a deal structure where there is no room for negotiation. You can go take it or leave it. And the person goes, "I'm leaving it." And after you get left behind about 100 times, then you may come to realize this is not a good deal for the other side. It might be good for you, but the other side's not buying. So your deal's all wrong. And they go, "I don't understand why." I said, "Did you ask anybody in advance what they wanted? Did you anticipate where this was going to go? Did you look how it competes competitively with all the other deals out there in the market?" And they're going, "No." I said, "Then why are you surprised?" I said, "You have no knowledge. There's no basis for surprise." Or the other way of looking at it is, well, surprise is all you're going to get because you have no basis for anticipating. You should have no expectation. So negotiation is done correctly. It will start with a little bit of an exploratory statement. We have term sheets, letters of intent, things that are intended to tease out what the other person wants, what the deal should look like, what benefits the other person, what creates a win-win scenario. Obviously, the bigger the transaction, the bigger the deal, the more time and effort you can put into it. I can't spend 4 hours discerning whether or not a Snickers bar is better than a Milky Way bar at the convenience store. That doesn't make any sense. But if I'm spending any sizable amount of my money, I want to spend an appropriate amount of time. I also want not to overspend. We all know people will spend $1 to save a nickel. Well, that's not a good investment of their time, but if that's the way they're wired, good for them. So negotiation helps elicit the information you need. It should lead to a relationship, which may lead to a deal. I see the deal as a consequence of forming a relationship, not the other way around.
Yeah, very well said. And I guess that really puts the term qualifying into play, right? Is qualifying the person you're in the process of meeting, not actually negotiating, to find out where their primary interest is, why they want to do something. Because the more you can learn, the more relevant you can be to the conversation. If 100 people are there for one reason, that new person may not be. And you're going to group them in that 100. And it may be for a million different reasons. Why not give yourself the benefit of learning what it is? And there's times when I negotiated for the person, which is they would come in, they want to buy a drill. And I'd ask them, what are you using it for? And they'd say, well, it's masonry work. And I'd have to say, it's not going to do the job. I mean, I could sell it to you and you could buy it, but I feel bad knowing it's not going to do the job and you're going to come back or be unhappy. And there's times when someone says, well, I would say, how often are you going to use it? Well, once a year, or it's a nifty thing I'll put in my toolbox. I would say, well, don't spend a lot of money on it, right? Because you want to get people what they want and need and are going to be happy with. If you're just flying into town for a weekend and grabbing what you can and leaving, well, again, that doesn't come into play, but then you're into a transactional relationship instead of a long-term relationship. And there's times when you don't know, they don't know, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but you want to get it done. And then that's where earnouts or clawbacks or, just the ability to recalibrate. Okay, we'll start here. In 3 months, we'll see where it is. And if we misunderstood, let's bring it back to the middle. Some people will do that, some people won't. But again, you bring something up that can bridge the gap in the get it going process and the reevaluation and maybe renegotiation of it. I mean, if you get a CD in a bank, they give you a set interest. If it's 90 days, in 90 days, you can roll it over and keep it going. Or you can say, hey, there's a bank that's going to give another point across the street. I'll take it there. And time lost by being too strong in negotiation is opportunity lost. Because if you got to wait another week, and that's another thing people come in the store. Well, I know, because when I was in Lakewood, I would say, people come, well, there's a store in Aurora that will give it to me for $5 less. And I said, well, you know how long it's going to take you to drive to Aurora from Lakewood and how much gas is involved? And what if they don't have it when you show up? Was that worth $5? And it also is a projection on yourself. Well, aren't I worth that extra $5 for being so nice and thoughtful and kind to you? Isn't there a premium, or is it just, I don't care who I'm dealing with? And that's where maybe online makes a lot of sense. But again, it's being human, and having that human capability is a quality advantage when you're negotiating, because it's like, I don't always get the best price, but I enjoy the experience, right? How does one hairdresser get $200 or $500 for a haircut and someone's getting $20? The same scissors, maybe not the same experience, but some people like that VIP treatment. And again, someone told me who was very smart at one point, when you're offering something, there's usually three elements: there's price, there's quality, and there's service. If you try to offer more than one, you're not going to do very well. If you try to offer all three, you're going to be out of business. And if you take most businesses like Costco, they give you a great price. They don't give you a lot of selection. They don't give you a lot of service because they can't afford it to keep that price. So they know their motivation is you're coming here to buy more than you want at a lesser price than you deserve, because you'll find out, I just bought 3 pounds of oatmeal. I usually buy 12 ounces, which lasts me 2 months. But hey, it's half the price if I bought three of these. And again, to Carl's point, are you majoring in the minors? Because sometimes you're better off saying it's a one-time deal. I don't need 10 of these things. So I'll pay more for the one, get what I need, and move forward. And it's all these factors, and you can classify and group people into different groups. But is giving yourself a chance, like I say, why not buy some vowels before you try to solve the puzzle? And why don't you find what would truly make you happy? Because if I'm going to bend over backwards and you're still not going to be happy, what was the point of me doing all this extra stuff? And in turn, what does happiness mean? Will you come back again? Will you send people to me? Will you talk good about your experience? That makes it worth me doing. And you can even explain that. Here's why I'm doing it. It's not a typical situation, but I'm willing to take all the knowledge I can into consideration and make a judgment. Those are important. So we're coming up on top of the hour, Karl. It goes so quick when we get involved, and especially when we get some quality audience comments. What could you say to kind of put a cherry on top of this?
Well, it sounds like Don's going to throw a oatmeal party at his house, not the regular barbecue, but he's going to invite everybody over. We're going to have a bowl of oatmeal. Maybe he'll throw in some toppings. And on a cold, snowy day like today in Denver, that doesn't sound so bad actually, if we can get from here to there. But I think that negotiations is a form of communication. It's intended to reach a transaction or a deal of some kind, but the building of the relationship during the course of this, even if it's a short, temporary, can you put extra stuff in my coffee at the coffee shop? Building that relationship has more value sometimes than the rest of everything else that comes out of the deal or the transaction. And so keep that in mind as something to consider in terms of investing your time and money as you're going through the negotiating process.
That's a great way to top off a great conversation. And again, Carl's available. I'm available for further conversation if you have an interest in pursuing things along the lines. I think we're both pretty seasoned negotiators and at least know all the elements involved and are not foreign to anything that could come up. And some things do come up that blindside you. And a lot of times it's what area of the negotiation are you in? The last thing you want to do is throw in a monkey wrench at the very end, at the signing. That would be the worst. The best place is get it out front, right? Nobody likes a surprise, whether it's positive or negative. And, why not treat people again like you want to be treated, and take a little extra time and care and attention. What might be routine to you may be a first time situation. When a 16-year-old kid buys his first car, that's a whole different experience than someone who's 60 or so, has bought cars all their life. And how do you treat them? Because you want to bring, I would say, not being totally altruistic, but make it a better world for people. Make it an easier time when people are going through difficult times. And we always talk about a simple smile can go a long way towards somebody who might need that and you don't know about it. So little kindness, a little more thought, taking a little more time, not just enough time, but whatever time is required to make it a positive experience. And you'll build on the goodwill that you keep building. You know, there was that one salesman, I won't talk about the car guy, who filled out a simple handwritten note on someone's birthday or celebration and turned out to be hundreds of thousands and became like the #1 car guy. Learn from that. Start with that, because you can write a note. You can call somebody up. You know, if you're in a store and you're not doing anything, then create something. Call an old customer up. How you doing? Just want to know how things are working out for you. You know, it's better than sitting there wondering when the door's going to open. Make the door open. So anyways, with that said, we'll close this out. Tomorrow we've got Kelly and Dave Snell. It should be great. The conversation is going to be about values. And I think that also lends itself to negotiation about everything else you do in life. So with that said, thank you so much, Karl. Thank you, audience.